Should you sell brands like Marks & Spencer's or should you actually aim for Stone Island? In this video, we're going to talk about low-end versus high-end brand selling. What's going on, everybody? So for those that don't know, in 2012, I set up my own vintage and secondhand clothing brand called Gullygarms, and sadly last year I had to close it due to COVID, Brexit, and a multitude of different reasons, unfortunately. However, it's actually been a very good thing. It's probably one of the best things. I've wanted to come here now and give value on what I've learned in the last 12 years of studying and being a part of the ecosystem that is vintage and secondhand. And today's video, we're going to look at low-end versus high-end brands and which one is better or which one is maybe more suitable for you. So just to simplify this, low-end brands are typically brands that are mass-produced maybe a lot more, they're easily obtainable, and they are just more frequent to find, less intention for people wanting to buy them. So an example might be Jack & Jones, it might be Superdry, All Saints. It could be different versions of those brands. And high-end brand selling is when you focus on brands that are the complete opposite of that. Very expensive, few and far between, and very desired. So the Stone Island, the Stussy, the Palace. Now when people initially look at this topic, they will always focus on the high end because you're always going to be more attracted to the thing that has the bigger green flags. You look at something like a Stone Island and you go, this is going to sell for a lot of money, this is what everybody wants, and it's good for the brand. And I can't even fault that because some of the brands I know that have pioneered themselves from just selling brands like Stone Island, CP is astounding, and they've really set themselves up from a really good foundation. But I don't want to just focus on that today. I really want to look at what low-end brand selling is and what high-end brand selling is. As much as it's easy to just say, well, I would focus on high-end brands because people actually want them, they're more expensive. And not only that, but there's more profit in the low-end items. And this is why intention plays a big role in where we look at this, because you might be somebody that wants to build a brand off of selling high-end desired items, wanting less profit but better presentation and better stature and aesthetic. Or you might be somebody that is happy with the volume selling, loves the tedious tasks, and just want to funnel through lots of items at low costs and higher margins. Now in terms of this, I've got a few examples that I want to give of people that actually do the low-end selling and the high-end selling and give a little bit of a perspective so that you can look at it. I'm going to use two brands to represent, one for low and one for high here. For the low-end brand selling, we're going to look at Messina Hembury. Now I do know the guys at Messina Hembury and I think that their business model is brilliant. I think what they've done is impressive. But they represent the low-end brand selling in a sense where they do sell a mixture of high-end and designer, but their underlying theme is pretty much low-end, any type of brands, and they just go for the volume. And by going for the volume, they go for the lower prices, and it's a better turnaround for what they do. And then I'm going to look at Files London that do focus on the high-end distinctively, like Jean-Paul Gaultier, Izzy Miyake, Alexander McQueen, and many other ones underneath that umbrella. So again, when I look at this one about low-end versus high-end, I do think that there's a big preference in your intention with what you want to do. One argument is that selling low-end is actually very simple. You don't need to understand the brands, you don't need to understand much about it, and as a result of it being cheaper, it's easier to obtain and there's less pressure on you selling it for a higher price. So you take someone like Messina Hembury, for example, who had an impressive, I think, I'm going to have a screenshot here, potentially 30 to 40,000 products on their eBay, and they're distributed over a lot of different platforms as well. Not to mention they have like a lot of different things, but their business model is all about volume. They are low price selling, accepting probably lots of low offers, but going for the numbers game of things. This means that if they wanted to, they wouldn't have to be so into the brands that they sell, and they could pretty much just write the tags, upload the products, and be like that. Granted, with a lot of volume that they are dealing with, they have to work through a lot of fakes and a lot of bootleg products to separate from eBay, which wouldn't allow that. And I'm sure the guys at Messina have a pretty extensive team of people who understand that concept anyway. But what I'm saying is they are volume sellers underneath a low-end brand practice, so they will sell a lot more variety of brands with a different range of prices. And somebody like Files, who works on very bespoke items, has a much higher price point per item. I will say from a standpoint of aesthetic that you would probably think I sit more on the high-end side of things, as once you start to invest in products that cost a lot more money, the aesthetic needs to be really tight, and that's when a creative element is actually needed to help funnel the sale. And Files do an amazing job here. Hopefully I'm showing you some of their models. I honestly give a round of applause to their presentation. They have captured their look incredibly. But Messina and Files represent two different sides of this same industry. They're both essentially doing the same thing. They're perpetuating a second-hand and a sustainable movement through the practice of buying and selling vintage and pre-loved goods. However, one market focuses on volume and the other focuses on minimalistic approach through the high-end brands. If you want to be a high-end seller, these are kind of the simplified points that I would say. You have to understand and have an incredible knowledge on bespoke brands that you are working with. You have to be very in tune with fashion weeks and the streetwear style and the way that the ecosystem of these bespoke brands in the high-end system is actually being altered. For example, you look at high-end designers and you look at the impact of selling different brands. When Balenciaga did all that stuff that everybody was like, whoa, about, you think about the people who sold the high-end brands. If you're selling Balenciaga and you're making a profit off it, you've also got a lot of money invested in a brand that now has a jaded perspective. Whereas when you look at the brands that sell literally all sorts, from Superdry to Jack & Jones to also Dolce & Gabbana and the high-end designer Italian imported, but a much bigger variety, there's less focus on you having to know your brands because you're selling a lot more products and you're not trying to be seen as somebody who's focusing on bespoke brands. So I think if you're a high-end seller, you're somebody who wants to work on pure aesthetic, you want to have a reputation that brings people to a set select product, you want to be known for something bespoke. So high-end sellers and high-end brand sellers are people who really want to work on the brands that they're selling. Whereas the low-end brand sellers, or people who work on more of a volume selling approach, I think work towards more of the practice of what it is they're doing, creating a system through the momentum. Some statistics might be crazy. One jacket from a high-end brand could be the equivalent of 20 products from a low-end brand. However, the profit from the 20 products could exceed the high-end brand by like 10 or 15 times. Actually incredible how both of those types have positives and have negatives, but also have other positives and negatives that inverse it. When we look at low-end and high-end, I think it's about intention. I think it's about where you want to be. If you want to be somebody who doesn't want to put that much effort into the process of it, but you just want to get a feel for buying and selling, I would advise going for low-end brand selling just to get your foot in the door and work through brands that you can start to understand. Items where you can buy for less than £5 each and try and sell for £10 and just work on small margins and building it up. And if you want to be a high-end seller, I would just say really understand what it is you want to do with those brands, understand what your aesthetic is, the brands that you want to learn. Maybe you already know, but I would just say as a tip, maybe just try and learn at least like 10 to 15 of the high-end brands, because it's nothing worse than seeing somebody who sells just Stone Island, CP and Arc'teryx constantly. And I know I just said that there's some people who do that and they've done a really good job. They will get to a point where that becomes oversaturated. I think people need to realize that. So guys, that was my opinion on low-end brands versus high-end brands. Feel free to drop a comment with what you think. Disagree with me if you want. Add another perspective. Challenge me. I really welcome that because I'd like to get better at what I know in order to help you to understand more about what I know. So guys, stay safe, stay sustainable. Don't dance like me ever again like that, but do you, enjoy the process and just keep moving in the right direction. Keep doing you, keep going that way. We're not going that way, we're going that way, yeah?